You're listening to Sensitive Changemakers. This podcast is created for highly sensitive leaders and is designed to support you to embrace your strengths and gifts so you can feel more confident in your own mind and body and live a life with intention, purpose, and more importantly, joy. I'm your host, Kate Carter, a fellow HSP who has a BA Honours degree in education, is a fully trained and qualified professional coach and NLP practitioner, and has over 17 years of teaching and over 3 years of coaching experience supporting highly sensitive people. I believe that you can do anything you want to in this life, but that sometimes the path forward becomes muddy with self-doubt and fear of failure. It's my mission to help sensitive thought leaders peel away the self-doubt and stories holding them back, for them to see their own beauty and strength so they can increase self-confidence and self-trust through thought and embodiment work, and see their path clearly and move forward confidently, living their life with intention and purpose. I would love for you to come and join us. Hello and welcome to Sensitive Changemakers. This is the first one of 2024 and I'm delighted to welcome a really amazing lady. I've known Manisha on and off for the last, crikey, I think it might be 5-6 years. And I've loved seeing her work and how she communicates her knowledge to her audience. So I'm going to introduce her and then I'll let Manisha talk a little bit more about herself. So Manisha is a somatic healing practitioner focused on supporting highly sensitive people thrive in relationships. Through a combination of trauma-informed healing and mentoring, she helps her clients learn how to regulate their nervous system so they can gently work through the anxiety, unpressed emotions, and early trauma leading to people-pleasing, overgiving, and difficulty setting boundaries. Her work helps to empower her clients to shift deep-seated patterns so they can create healthier personal and professional relationships. And I'm hoping you can see just through that bio how amazing she is and how excited I am for this conversation. So Manisha, welcome. Is there anything you would like to add to that bio?
No. Well, first, just thank you for having me. And no, I think we'll probably get into it as we dive into our conversation, which I'm really excited about. So thank you for having me. Yeah.
No, thank you so much. And like I said, I think it is about 5-6 years since we've kind of known each other and sort of been in each other's kind of spaces. So
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it was like 2016. I was trying to remember that actually earlier today. But yeah, so it's been a minute for sure. And I think we've witnessed each other's like evolution in this work. So it's been really lovely.
Absolutely. And I love that you work with highly sensitive people. And how do you know that you're highly sensitive? Like what happened? What's your story? How did you know that you were?
Yeah, I don't even remember like the specific term at the time when I kind of realized that my sense, like my ability to kind of sense into things was different than others, but it was probably around 2015, 2016. I read a book, which I've recommended to so many clients. It's called Riding Between the Worlds, and it's related to like horse therapy. And I was reading it and I thought, oh my gosh, like I definitely have this way that I can tap into like the feelings of others, not because I'm trying to be invasive or do that purposely, but that I could feel so many things or that I could sometimes sense like what other people were thinking or feeling even like before they could. And I just didn't know that that was not normal because, how would you know? And so as I read that book, I really started to realize that oh my gosh, I am picking up on so many things that like the other people in my environment just weren't, and I'm being really affected by them. Like that was the bigger, the kicker right there. I thought, oh, I didn't realize like how affected I was just by my environment and the sounds. And so I don't even think it struck me at that point to think about being highly sensitive, but then later, like, this term is becoming more and more popular. And so as I heard it, I, looked more into it and I thought, oh yeah, this is me. And to be quite honest, I haven't like really gotten into like a ton of that literature. Like, I mean, I read it, skimmed it. I'm like, yep, this is me. But I feel like it's just my lived experience and it resonated. And so I didn't really feel at this time anyway to go like deep diving into all of the details, but certainly I recognize that, oh, my clients are also this way, and that's why they're experiencing life in this way. And so it's just like it was a lot of clicking that happened
Mm.
in those years, to really recognize that for myself. Yeah.
And did that knowledge kind of change anything for you? Did you sort of do anything different because of what you learned about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the biggest thing was I've always been into things like yoga and meditation. I mean, I was drawn to them from like quite an early age, just kind of on my own. But I recognized that I could understand why my body and
Mm.
mind crave that so much because I really needed the silence to process. I needed to be more connected to my body, and really start to understand like its own reactions. And so I think when I started to understand that connection from like a different perspective, not just because, oh, I like to do this practice and it helps calm me down. I was really like, oh, okay, I actually need this or
Mm.
need this and other things to help me get to a place where I'm not so focused on my external environment, but I have like a much deeper rooted connection to my internal environment. And over the years, I have really started to just recognize my own signs and symptoms, for lack of a better word. I know it's like a very medical thing to say, but just like those cues and those internal sensations and like what they mean. And I think we're so disconnected from our bodies in general. And so it's easy to have a feeling and then like let it fly to a reaction or make it mean something. And so that piece has just been very much more intentional
Mm.
over the years. And it definitely took a lot of learning. So I do hope that I can like fast track that for other people when they are struggling with that, because it took me a long time to figure out what I need. And to be honest, like it continues to like I shifts and changes. Some days certain practices work for me, sometimes like they don't, and I need something different. So I think it's just it evolves like as we evolve.
Yeah, I love so many things about that. I resonate with so many of them. One of the things that came up for me as you were talking was, have you ever experienced with yourself or with your clients where the that sort of emotional reaction that we, because sometimes not everybody has, but especially for highly sensitive people, can feel all consuming. And if you have that from a very young age, have you ever experienced it with yourself or clients where they kind of push that away and it almost, like you were saying, further disconnects the body from the mind because they go straight into the mind and want to make it mean something,
Mhm.
or they push it away? Or have you ever encountered that with yourself or others?
Yeah, both for sure. And the way I kind of understand that, or I have understood that in my own mind, is that as children, often if you are highly sensitive, and we live in a very like highly sensory environment, and often around people who don't really know how to navigate you as a highly sensitive person, even if they really want to, it's just you know, it takes some time to kind of find that attunement from a very intentional caregiver and all of that kind of stuff. I find that a lot of people haven't really learned how to work with, process, feel all their emotions. And so I do find that when people as adults like start to like just have these heightened emotions, there's like bypassing so many layers of like what's actually happening that it immediately goes to like a reaction of like what hurt or sadness or anger or whatever emotion it is. But because they haven't like learned or been taught really how to tune in, like all of those little pieces like underneath like the rage or the anger like get missed, and it just becomes like this massive reaction. And then you're like labeled as this like reactive person who can't like handle anything, or there's so many like labels that can be put upon a person. And I've definitely experienced that too, because I don't think there was a lot of language for this more until
Mm.
more recently. So I do find that people either push it down because they don't know how to feel And also because they got in trouble for expressing as kids, right? Like it was like, you're too much, stop crying. Why are you crying? Like, don't be a baby, like whatever all of the things are. And so your body, when it's moving to that, even as an adult, it's like, this is not safe. And it just like damps it all down and then it gets stuck, right? And then it can create or contribute, I should say, to a lot of other things like anxiety and depression and just like feeling ungrounded and unsettled. And so I think that there's like a mechanism that's like missing just because it hasn't been developed. And so when we can learn to slow everything down and like feel safe to kind of feel like even little pieces of the emotions and start to recognize like, oh my gosh, there's so many layers under here. And what if I just could learn how to feel them a little bit at a time so that they don't ball up and like suddenly become like a huge reaction to the outside. So I hope I answered your question. I know I just said a
Yeah.
lot of things.
No, I could listen to you talk for it. I think it's absolutely fascinating, and that's definitely my experience as well with my own journey and also clients that I've had, is that it's almost like the emotions weren't safe to feel, and so it was either dampen them and not feel them at all, or just kind of just completely disconnect and
Mhm.
not have anything to do with it at all. And then obviously it comes up later in life, doesn't it? And you
It-
realize that actually one of the ways that people do it is through kind of talking therapy, which is absolutely amazing in its own right. That's
Mhm.
not to
Absolutely.
say anything, but I know what you really love doing is, there's the term, isn't there, top down or bottom up.
Yes, exactly. Hmm.
And I know I've been listening to a course that I'm doing at the moment, and they were saying top down isn't really top down, it's just top. Like
Oh, yeah.
there isn't any
Yeah.
down, it's just top. And what that means is, for those people who are listening, it's very much kind of using our cognitive ability to be able to talk things through. But I love what Manisha does, because actually what she's doing here is talking about how things affect the body, and that bottom up approach. So feeling those emotions and feeling what's happening in the body to enable you to move past whatever you would like to move past or move through. Would that be a good kind of summary?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I think that we are really taught to like label things and have words for things, and that's such a high value in Western society, and so it's just sort of natural. And then I think a lot of times, like when you're highly sensitive, you're just really tuned in, and like you can analyze and overthink, and so I think that also leads itself to wanting to understand, and then the wanting to understand I think gets confused with like having like solved your problem. And I think talking about things and having a context for things is so valuable, and understanding the dynamics and the psychology and sort of how family systems play into it or relational patterns, like this is all extremely helpful. And for some people, and I've said this a lot of times, like for some people that works, like,
Mm-hmm.
incomplete, and they're like, okay, like I understand this and now my behavior can change. But I find that when you're highly sensitive, you have like internalized things in like a different way and they really have sat in your body. So I have particularly found pretty consistently that as a highly sensitive person, there are other modalities that can be joined in with certainly talking and putting things into context and understanding them, but to help you release like what you're holding in your body. I carry a lot of tension in my muscles, like when I'm stressed, and there's certain parts of my body that get like overactivated. I've shared this in the past, like I've had two frozen shoulders because I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, and they were years ago. So, I mean, I'm older now, but this was happened like years ago. And I was like, this makes no sense. But it was really like my body just freezing
Mm.
essentially because I had not worked through so many things. And so there is a wild connection. We can't always draw a straight line. But yeah, there's just so much there, I think, for folks who are highly sensitive that we just need like another input, like another layer.
And I love what you said there, just to kind of highlight that highly sensitive people have a tendency to internalize things. And I think that goes hand in hand with that kind of wanted to know things and going deeper. And not only do we do that mentally, but we also do it physically in our body as well.
Mhm.
So I love that kind of just highlighting the fact. And you talked there about different modalities that people could use to support them to kind of
Mhm.
release it bodily. What ones have you, obviously I know there are lots out
Mhm.
there, but what
Yeah.
ones do you use or work with clients on?
So, I mean, I taught yoga for many years. I don't anymore, but that was like one of my big ones. But then I've also done a lot of dance and movement that has been incredibly helpful. Just in the last year, I've got a little bit more into running. And so that's been really interesting to notice. And then most recently, like just going to the gym and doing like some strength training and weight training, like that has really helped me metabolize a lot of the more intense emotions that will show up. But, it's such a range. There's so many beautiful like martial arts practices and, movement practices that specifically work on trauma and, like a whole host of things and then there's, of course, like modalities like EMDR, brain spotting, and, more like psychology related. Practices. I practice like with clients, I will support them in doing a little bit of like meditation to tune into their body. So very like body-based meditations. And then so that they can start to make those connections. I will sometimes share like a yoga practice that might be particularly helpful. But I also have a background in a modality called craniosacral therapy, which is like a hands-on modality, certainly, but there's a part of it around somato-emotional release. So releasing emotions like from your soma or from your body. And so through the meditations and guided practice, it may help them connect in with some of the areas where they're like really holding a lot of tension, as well as this newest modality. I think you are also on the education train and are constantly learning. So I think we're similar in that way. But a modality called focusing, and that is really supporting people just to recognize like those parts within us that um, maybe a little bit hidden or may need extra support and like really being with them and befriending them. Because so often we have these pieces of us that kind of get stuck in our memories in our bodies, like from early experiences, and then they get tucked away. And then we don't know, like, really, we don't really necessarily interact with them because we don't even know that they're present, but they certainly impact our relationships with other people because they're doing something, right? That's like not necessarily a natural thing to be like just hanging out in our body. So that can come up as like a little bit of pain or a little bit of a sensation or other things like that. And so when we can learn to be with those and befriend those and not try to like push them away or try to get rid of them or all of these types of things, we can slowly start to help them dissolve and like help them integrate. So yeah, there's so
Mm,
many things.
yeah.
I think it can be hard, a little overwhelming. I don't want people to feel overwhelmed. But like if you're kind of newer to this or you're like, well, I don't really know, I would say walk in nature. If
Yeah.
you can get to nature, like walk in nature, slow yourself down, see if you could listen to either nothing or if that's really hard for you, music with no words, just to start to tune into like what's happening inside of me,
Mm,
right? And then you can slowly, and then just see what you're drawn to, right? Like, and go from there.
yeah, I love that. I know for me it was very much meditation was my kind of it was a huge breakthrough discovering meditation and sticking with it to see the long lasting benefits, not just those sort of, I think people think you can just sit in meditation, you'll feel relaxed and it will all be fine. But
Mm-hmm.
it was more about the long term effects for me and actually spending that time like connecting with myself because I think I know a lot of the listeners resonate with this as well. We are, and I said this earlier, very disconnected from mind and body. And for some of us, just sitting and being in our bodies can feel really uncomfortable. And
Mm-hmm.
so meditation was kind of my gateway into sitting with my body and not wanting to escape it because that's how I
Mm-hmm.
felt for so long. So I
Yeah.
know that's such a wonderful a wonderful modality to use. And I love what you've said there. Go for a walk in nature. I think it's such a simple but powerful thing to do. Just to, like you said, it actually forces you to slow down. It forces your breathing to kind of just, and then you
Hmm.
can see what is going on inside. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I know that what you really specialize in is relationships. And I remember listening to one of your podcasts, because Manisha's got her own podcast, which we'll talk about later.
Yes.
Um, but I know I was listening to one and you were talking about the most important relationship is with yourself and obviously people around you as well. But talk to me about like, why is the relationship with
Mhm.
ourselves one of the most important relationships that we have?
Yeah, it's such a both and, and I think obviously community and interconnection
Mm,
and interdependence is so important, but I find that it's really challenging to have like healthy relationships or relationships that feel good with others when you don't really have a connection to yourself. And I find that especially as someone who's highly sensitive, who's maybe like more outwardly focused and tuned into the feeling of others. And if you're empathic and you're absorbing those feelings, like you really can feel a little bit like a blob because you're like, what am I feeling? I don't even know. I felt fine right now. And I walk into a room and now I feel terrible and I don't even understand why that is. And so I think we can understand, like, well, of course, it's going to be hard to like have clear conversations or not take things personally or engage with people when you don't even know like what you're feeling or what your own thoughts are because you're so susceptible to other people's. So I find that when we can take some of that time, exactly as you said, like in the meditation or in whatever modality you practice, we really start to get a sense of like, well, who am I in like my little bubble? Like, where are my edges? And then when another person's energy comes in, we can recognize it as like, oh, okay, like this is what they're experiencing and feeling. Like it's not what I'm experiencing and feeling. And how can I learn to like be with that and engage with them in all of their stuff while I'm sitting here in all of my stuff? And not take it on or not take it personally. And I think over responsibility is like a big thing for folks like I will just say us or definitely me. Um, and so when we can, yeah, spend some of that time almost like creating a little bit of like a healthy boundary, right? Like a healthy,
mm,
and I talk about energetic boundaries a lot, like with clients and just sort of in my work, because sometimes boundaries can feel very like harsh, but if your energetic boundaries are super porous and you're just like taking on and taking in and you can't tell what's yours and what somebody else's, like it's really hard to have healthy relationships because you're just like constantly in the mix of
mm.
somebody else. So
Yeah.
I really find it a both and I feel like I'll just add this that when we can have that healthy sense of self and like have that relationship like our internally our external relationships like get so much better because we can clearly communicate. I mean, as best as we can. We're all human and it's like messy for sure. It's not like, oh, now it's perfect. People's feelings are still going to get hurt. You're still going to say something that you have to take back and apologize for. Like it's all there, but you can do it from this sense of like, I'm a human. And like we said at the beginning of the podcast, like nobody's perfect. Like I can apologize. I can maybe hear an apology and accept it, right? Like these are all relational skills that are just easier to access like when we have that relationship with ourselves.
I love that. And what I'm really curious, what made you support people with relationships?
I think like as an entrepreneur, we go through these phases where we're like, what am I actually doing with people? Sometimes because you're like, I feel like they're getting better in a lot of different areas. Like, what's really happening here? And so there is, a moment where I was kind of doing some of that own reflection, and I started to look at the clients I worked with through craniosacral work, through some private yoga, and so even though it was like this disconnection of body mind, and there might have been some early childhood trauma or just difficult life experiences, everything always came back to like, oh, and their relationships are getting better. And so it sort of revealed itself. Like it wasn't like I'm going to focus on relationships. It was like, oh, this is what the majority like outcome is for people on the other side. Like, and certainly they improved in their health. And so it's really hard not to be like, and I do this and I do this. And it's like, yes, like as a side effect, lots of great things happen, right? From any kind of coaching, therapeutic work, like all of this stuff. That was like so striking, like across the board, especially with the whole like people pleasing and boundaries thing,
Mm.
because we can get so caught up in that. And so as people got connected to themselves, they're just relationships across the board, like not just with partners, but with family members and colleagues and all of that improved.
That's beautiful. And you picked on there on something that I think is really important for a lot of the listeners, which is people pleasing. So, and I know for highly sensitive, it's more likely that you're going to
Mhm.
people please. What would you advise somebody who found that in their relationships they were that people pleaser? Have you got any kind of support or steps that they could
Mhm.
take?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it, so hopefully like if someone's listening to this, they might just be like, do I dim my own preferences? Do I not share what I think? Like, do I wait for somebody else to share their opinion and then I jump on board with mine? And then if you're at that place, you're like, yeah, okay, I do that more than maybe I think is, healthy or helpful or whatever. I would start to invite them to recognize, like, okay, in that scenario, if they were to say, like, hey, I want this for dinner, or I mean, I'm using a very benign example, or I want to go to this movie, like, what happens inside? Like, do you feel a little contracted? Do you feel a little hesitant? Like, and you can even ask yourself, like, what do I think would happen if I just expressed what I actually think here, And there's a whole host and a range. And I think that when we have had experiences as young people where, our opinions were not taken, or we were yelled at for having them, or we were yelled at for being like emotional or too much, or all of these things, like really any self-expression can feel really scary. And so kind of sitting with that. And when it's like these sort of like safer topics, right? Like you could play with some of those and be like, oh, wow, like my stomach feels a little knotted because I want to, oh, that's interesting. Like, what if I put my hand on my stomach and take a few deep breaths and like say what I actually want to this person who's like a relatively safe person? It's tricky because like we can be in so many different situations and some
Mm,
situations truly are not safe to do that. And so that's why I'm just couching it in this way, like in the places where you're like, nothing bad will actually happen if I say that I want to have chicken instead of fish. Like, okay, let me try that and like kind of, work with my body to get over like this anxiety that it feels.
yeah. And if I can add in an example from my own personal experience here, because I say a recovering people pleaser. It still comes in every so often. But one of the things I'm lucky that I have a husband who likes me to make decisions. So he's like, Kate, what do you want to do? I'm like, ah. And when I always used to say, I don't know, what do you want to do? He's like, no, I'm asking what you want to do. And
Yes.
so one of our things is on a Friday we have a film night. So we just watch something off like one of the sort of streaming
Hmm.
channels, and we have a pizza. And he said to me the other night, I picked a film and I said, oh, do you want to watch this? And he went, I don't care. I'm just happy that you're now at a stage where you're picking a film.
Oh,
So
I love that.
it can be as small as that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that example so much because of the relationship piece. Like sometimes we're in this work and we're like, oh, all our relationships are like challenging or we have to like kind of fight to say or what. But then no, that's not true, right? Like relationships also help us heal,
Yeah,
right? There are going to be people in our lives who like fully see us and sort of recognize that it's hard for us, and they're going to like encourage us to do the thing that's a little hard and like make it really safe. So that's such a beautiful example.
yeah. It's been a fun one as well. And one, like you said, that felt safe. It wasn't an unsafe
Mhm.
scenario. So I love that you brought that in as well, because at the end of the day, everything comes back down to safety, doesn't it?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
so thank you so much. And I mentioned earlier about Manisha's podcast. Would you like to share that?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so my podcast is called the Transform Your Relationship Podcast, and there's a lot of solo episodes. There's some guest episodes. I'm a little behind on the guests, to be honest, at this moment in time. But I'd really talk a lot about like relationships and nervous system health, and how like our early experiences impact our current relationships, obviously all the things related to being a highly sensitive person. And I really invite guests on that, have maybe alternative modalities and like different ways to support, not only our nervous systems, but like, yeah, our collective healing. And so I'm excited to kind of dive back into some of the guest episodes. But yeah, I did like the end of both years. It's only like a year and a half old, but did some guided practices like somatic meditations like for last December and this December. So if you're feeling like, what is a somatic work, or what is, that's a great way to just kind of touch in. And then of course, like I'd love it if people scrolled through and found topics they liked and wanted to learn more about.
Yeah, and it's a lovely, and you've got such a calming, relaxing voice as well to
Thank
listen
you.
to. So it is a wonderful one. And I haven't listened to December's. I've had a bit of a break from everything social media wise actually, but I
Yeah.
will go back and listen to those. So
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
And how can people find out more about you? Obviously you've got podcasts, but where else can they find you?
Yeah, so my website is my full name, manishatare.com. So people can go there and kind of find like how, a little bit more about me and how to work with me. I'm on Instagram. Sometimes I'm more active, sometimes I'm less active, but also at Manisha Tare, my full name. So those are probably the three best places: podcast, the website, and Instagram.
Perfect. And I'll put those links in the show notes. And I just want to pick out there how you were subtly kind of honoring your energies there and going, sometimes I'm there, sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. That's like sometimes it's a bit much.
Yeah.
It's like
And
working on it, but
absolutely normalizing. I think that's one of the things I'm going to be taking through to 2024, because I have a definitely a kind of a push through attitude that really isn't in alignment with who I am or what my energies are. So I love that you've kind of normalized that and brought it in as a thing that's okay to do.
Yeah, it's just like going with like, I felt it. I thought, oh my gosh, I had a trip to India back in November, and I sort of like just paused for there, and I thought, oh, I'll just get right back on. But then a lot of other things happened, and I was like, you know what? It's okay. Like nothing bad will happen. It's like that safety thing that I was saying, or like you
Yeah,
feel like you have to do it because something bad will happen. And I'm like, oh, it's okay. Nothing bad will happen if I don't put my podcast out for like a month. Like it will be fine. And
yeah,
I will just carry on, and it's
yeah.
okay.
Absolutely. I love that you've got that insight, because I think it's such an important one, and one that often gets overlooked in definitely in the online space. So I'm
Yeah.
so happy that you brought that to our attention. Is there anything else you would like to add in or leave with the listeners?
I don't think so. No, I'm just so happy to have this conversation. I loved your questions. This is obviously a topic I love talking about
Yeah.
like nonstop. So I appreciate, yeah, I just appreciate our conversation so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being here and for being a guest. It's been wonderful. I love everything you do, and I've kind of found myself nodding every time I listen to you. So thank you
Oh,
so much for bringing your knowledge here. And thank you to the listeners as well. If you have any questions, please do go and search up for Manisha and ask away. I'm sure she'd be more than happy to answer any questions. And I will be back next week with another episode. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. If you have any takeaways or any questions, please do reach out to me either through Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook at Kate Carter Coaching, or you can email me at kate@katecarter.co.uk. I always love to hear your feedback and the things that you have taken from the podcast. If you know of any other highly sensitive people, then please do share this so that I can reach more and support more highly sensitive people to embrace their strengths and gifts. As a thank you, I will pick a winner every month for a free 50-minute coaching session with me. Thank you so much.